time short. Comrades and friends, there's kind of big news out of Washington today. But I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with the big event here today and the big news out of Washington 2 days ago. Today, as has been mentioned, was the 11th annual Trans Day of Action here in New York. I was at work, so I couldn't be there. But I know that it was full of anger, full of beauty, and full of a fighting spirit. And this Trans Day of Action came just 2 days after a sister named Genesette Gutierrez, a Mexican undocumented immigrant trans woman, you saw it, courageously disrupted a White House LGBT pride event, interrupted President Obama's speech to call on him to release all LGBTQ immigrants from detention. Shamefully, she was roundly booed by those gathered. The bougie-ass, Barneys-clad representatives of various class collaborationist organizations that claim to speak for our communities, but whose close ties with the ruling class, the corporations and banks and politicians, actually distance them from most LGBTQ people. Sister Gutierrez was booed and dragged out for daring to speak up for some of the most oppressed. But in the aftermath of her bold action, she has also been applauded, supported, embraced, cheered, and thanked by many, many, many people all over both social media and traditional media in the last 2 days. There's been an outpouring of pride and solidarity with Genesette Gutierrez for, as she herself characterized it, reviving the spirit of Stonewall. So that's how this year's Pride Week opened. Next, tomorrow is the annual Dyke March, and then on Sunday, the big march down Fifth Avenue that commemorates those glorious nights that week in late June 1969 when trans people, gay men and lesbians resisted a police raid on the Stonewall Inn, physically fought in hand-to-hand combat with the cops, uprooted street lamps and smashed them into the cop car windows, rose up, in other words, and with that uprising sparked a new movement. Now, if this were an ordinary period, my talk would be mostly about that movement, how it has developed, about the dialectics of the movement now 46 years on, its class character, its contradictions, its successes and failures, and its prospects in the period to come. And it will be about this, but only partly and only briefly, because this is an extraordinary period and there are more pressing matters to address, namely solidarity. That is, not only the struggle of those of us who are oppressed as LGBTQ people, but solidarity with the most important struggle facing the U.S. working class today, which of course is the anti-racist struggle. Today, 9 days after the Charleston massacre, filled with rage and horror and disgust at the endless racist rampages throughout the country, we must say it over and over: Black Lives Matter. Black trans lives matter. And this must be our rallying cry for Pride 2015. And not only because it's right, not only because the moment demands it, but because it will build unity, it will strengthen the class struggle. And that is what will ultimately be the way forward for all oppressed peoples and our entire class as we build a fighting movement to overturn this terrible capitalist system. This is my most important point: our commitment to building LGBTQ solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, our recognition of the need to fight hardest alongside the most oppressed inside our communities, and that is LGBTQ people of color, especially trans people of color, and the particular responsibility of white LGBTQ people in this regard. I'll come back and say more about that, But first, let's go ahead and talk about today's big news, the historic Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage. In their ruling, the Supremes established marriage as a constitutionally protected federal right between any two adults of any sex or gender. Yes, we in the community call them the Supremes. The court found, in other words, that no state has the right to bar anyone from marriage, very much as it ruled in 1967 in Loving versus Virginia, when the court overturned so-called miscegenation laws that banned so-called interracial marriage, and finally recognized as legal the marriage of Mildred Loving, who was black, with her husband Richard Loving, who was white. This comparison between same-sex marriage and the Loving case is not mine. The comparison, the argument that same-sex marriage should be allowed for the same reasons that so-called interracial marriage was allowed, has been made by many groups and individuals, from the NAACP to the late Coretta Scott King, and most strikingly by Mildred Loving herself. I have her whole statement. If anyone wants to read it, they can, but I'm going to quote briefly from a statement that Mildred Loving issued on June 12th, 2007, which was the 40th anniversary of the Supreme Court ruling in her case, and just 1 year before she died. She said, quote, "Not a day goes by that I don't think of Richard and our love, our right to marry, and how much it meant to me to have that freedom to marry the person precious to me, even if others thought he was the wrong kind of person for me to marry. I believe all Americans, no matter their race, no matter their sex, no matter their sexual orientation, should have that same freedom to marry. Government has no business imposing some people's religious beliefs over others, especially if it denies people's civil rights. I am proud that Richard's and my name is on a court case that can help reinforce the love, the commitment, the fairness, and the family that so many people, black or white, young or old, gay or straight, seek in life," unquote. I find Mildred Loving's support, her active support, her decision to take a vocal stand on this issue deeply moving. However, I also know that same-sex marriage is not the most pressing issue on our agenda. It's not the most pressing struggle facing the LGBT community. And it's definitely not the most important struggle facing our great multinational working class. This is what marriage is not. But what is marriage? Well, we've won it now, and the justices have weighed in. And in the majority decision, Justice Anthony Kennedy waxed quite eloquent writing about what marriage is. He wrote, quote, "From their beginning to their most recent page, the annals of human history reveal the transcendent importance of marriage. The lifelong union of a man and a woman always has promised nobility and dignity to all persons," unquote. Justice Kennedy got it completely wrong. Not a word of that is accurate. Not a word of it is true, especially the part about from the beginning of human history. So, the historical roots of marriage go back to the origin of patriarchal society, the tragic triumph of the male supremacist social order that is still in place today, and the defeat of the classless matriarchy that was the original organization of human society and that held for roughly 200 to 250,000 years from the time that modern Homo sapiens emerged as a species until the emergence of agriculture about 10,000 years ago. With agriculture came in fairly short order material surpluses of the sort that had never before existed. And with surpluses came the emergence of social economic classes. Simultaneous with these developments came what I consider one of the great tragedies in human history, the discovery of paternity, the male's role in reproduction, which unfortunately humans figured out around that point. And this led to patrilineal inheritance, accumulated wealth being passed down from father to son. and the new configuration of patriarchal marriage, which was basically a vehicle for passing ownership of female human beings from father to husband, ensuring paternity for purposes of inheritance, and enshrining male supremacy on the private household front as well as in the public sphere. That's what marriage is and was. So, why would any self-respecting queer person want anything to do with such an institution? Well, I believe there are two answers to that question of why a same-sex couple might want to get married. First is that legal marriage comprises some 1,400 federal rights and benefits that are not available to couples who are not married. Looking at one arena alone, federal income tax, I can testify from personal experience that for a working class couple, the difference between filing as two single individuals and filing as a married couple amounts to thousands of dollars a year. This in itself is reason enough to explain why many same-sex couples, especially workers, might want to get married. There's a misconception that the marriage right is somehow a middle-class or bourgeois matter, but actually just the opposite is true. As again, I can personally testify. It confers material, concrete benefits, most of all on couples in the working class. And there's a second answer to the question of why queer couples might want in on marriage despite its roots and meaning. And that answer is, who cares? Whose business is it why any given couple decides they want to get married? If this is a right available to opposite-sex couples, it is our duty as supporters of equality to insist that it also be available to same-sex couples, and it's why we celebrate today's decision as a victory, period. As communists especially, we do not impose some sort of self-righteous, condescending, more revolutionary than thou marriage judgment, shake our heads and tisk 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 at lesbians, gay men, or anyone else who decide that they want in on a right, marriage, from which they've been excluded up until now. It is a question, I repeat, of equal rights, and we always support equal rights without judgment on the attitudes of or motivations of those who choose to exercise this brand new, newly available right. Now, it's necessary for me to say this. It's necessary for me to make that point emphatically because there is a whole current, both inside and outside of the LGBTQ movement, that opposes same-sex marriage and actually chides or scolds anyone who takes part in it. I'm not talking here about those who say our movement is about much more than marriage. We say that ourselves, and it's completely correct. I'm talking about those who condemn same-sex marriage as heteronormative wannabes, pro-establishment, bourgeois. It is this position itself that is petty bourgeois, fake radical, antithetic to a Marxist view of oppression and how to fight it. And it is divisive when what we need is a united struggle on all fronts. Now, is marriage the same as liberation? Of course not. Does marriage, now that it's become law, mean that we've won? The gay movement is done? Not in the least. There is still no federal protection against discrimination, so that, as a lot of people have been pointing out, for instance, if you go get married and your boss finds out and they didn't know you were LGBT, they might fire you. And they're perfectly able to do that under federal law if you don't live in a locale, a state or city that has its own anti-discrimination law. Violence against our community is still rampant, especially against trans people, especially against trans people of color. Queer kids are still being driven to suicide. And is it just, is it correct that any rights, from health benefits to taxation, have anything whatsoever to do with your relationship status? Whether you're in a relationship or not, and who your relationship is with. No, of course not. There should be universal health care like there is in Cuba for every human being. So much, obviously, remains to be done in the LGBTQ struggle and in the working class struggle as a whole. Furthermore, it's absolutely accurate to say that the single-focus obsession with the marriage issue that some wings of the movement have had serves to obscure the life-and-death struggle to survive that so many sisters and brothers, especially trans people of color, face. When the cops are beating you in the streets, when you have nowhere to sleep, or medical care, or food, or a job, marriage is not going to be at the top of your agenda. That it is presented to us as though it is testifies to the way much of the LGBTQ movement, some of the official organizations, have drifted away from the movement's radical roots, the way they've become so thoroughly bourgeois in character. And we must be sensitive to this, and we must not make this mistake ourselves. But we must also always, as communists, defend every concession we can wring from the ruling class, and we must be sensitive to those who do cling to the victories. And today was a victory that many people are celebrating. If you go down to the New York City Marriage Bureau, as I have done, you'll see couple after couple, 2 Filipino men from Queens, 2 African-American women from the Bronx, a white guy and a Latino who drove all the way up from Florida, so many others getting married. Or go to San Antonio, Texas, where my wife's sister's husband's niece, a young Latina who had, I think she's 21, who's had a very hard life. She recently announced her engagement to her girlfriend. Go look any of these folks in the eye, or any of the people celebrating tonight down at the Stonewall. Go look at their faces that are wet with tears of joy, and tell them, sorry, you're just a bunch of heteronormative sellouts begging for acceptance by and assimilation into straight society. No. What they are is oppressed people, grabbing onto a small piece of equality at last. No one has a right to denounce them for that, any more than you would denounce a worker whose union has won higher wages and medical coverage for them, even though maybe the rest of us don't have it. And I'm going to even take it further, and bring me up on charges if you think I'm wrong. If there are some queer people who do want to be accepted by straight society, if there are some folks who want nothing more than to blend in with their neighbors, to join the PTA, to go to backyard barbecues, to no longer be stigmatized, be different, be other, well, how dare anyone deride them for that? Sometimes all you long for is normalcy, acceptance, and I, for one, will never look down on any of my sisters and brothers who cling to this most modest dream. Some of us, of course, all of us in this room, I think, want much more. We want liberation in every possible sense of the word. We want to tear down the whole structure of this exploitive, oppressive, racist, vile, and destructive society, and we want to replace it with a whole new one. A society that frees up every human being to explore her fullest potential and express himself in every way, free of the fetters of old strictures and structures, and free of the old divisions, none of which is natural, all of which were created and imposed by the ruling class, and all of which block our efforts to forge class unity and build revolutionary struggle. There is no more important, more destructive, more crucially urgent matter facing the struggle of the working class and oppressed than racism. Racism is and always must be the #1 concern of every revolutionary. Now, at this moment in this country, the rampage of racist murders looms above everything else. Excuse me. Murders by individual ideological racists like the scum Rauf, who massacred 9 people at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston last week. Murders by killer cops, gunning down black people with immunity. The prison industrial complex, incarcerating and killing black people in ever-increasing numbers. The militarization of police and the rampant violence of this occupying force in black communities. There is a crisis facing the U.S. working class. It is the crisis of the state seeking to crush the black nation with raw armed force on behalf of the capitalist class. But here's the thing, comrades and friends. The state cannot crush the black nation. Not only can they not crush the black nation is rising up to crush them. And what a wonderful development that is. A new movement has arisen in this country with amazing speed, with inspiring strength, with profound militancy, with all the brilliance and rage and focus that they possess. Black youth have birthed this new militant that's sweeping across the country and thrilling everyone who's longed for a renewed fight back. And of course, this is Black Lives Matter. It's the grand civil rights movement of our time, and it is more than that. It has within it the potential to arouse and awaken our whole great multinational working class. It is, I believe, the harbinger of the revolution to come, because there's no single more crucial component of the class struggle than the national question, the oppression of the black, Latino, Native, Asian, and Arab masses. And there is no single more crucial aspect of the national question than the leading role of the great black nation. Black Lives Matter. What a simple declarative sentence, yet how bold and radical a sentiment it is in this most racist country. Black Lives Matter. How long have so many been waiting to shout it in the faces of the pigs? Black Lives Matter. Michael Brown matters. Freddie Gray matters. Ezell Ford matters. Tony Robinson matters. Freddie Gray matters. Eric Garner matters. Trayvon Martin matters. Tamir Rice matters. Chantel Davis matters. Akai Gurley matters. And our 9 sisters and brothers massacred in Charleston last week, they matter very much. Cynthia Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Tywanza Sanders, Reverend Daniel Simmons, Reverend DePayne Middleton Doctor, Myra Thompson. The protests that have swept the streets of the country over the last almost year now, shutting down highways and businesses from Los Angeles to New York, from Oakland to Boston, and of course from Ferguson to Baltimore, they're like a righteous cleansing flood. They've shocked and terrified the state and the bosses, while electrifying everyone who hates the state and the bosses. And some of the key leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement are African-American LGBTQ people. In fact, and this is just a side note, but I do want to mention it, 2 black lesbians who met during the Ferguson protests in August, Alexis Templeton and Brittany Ferris, announced a few months ago that they're engaged to be married. The struggle brings people together. The prominent role of openly queer black leadership in Black Lives Matter is a great development. So is the fact that speaker after speaker at all the anti-cop rallies I know of, queer and non-queer, speaker after speaker, say black queer lives matter, and specifically say black trans lives matter. Solidarity among the movements is growing and deepening. This is a new day. And I believe that the entire working class movement has the Black Lives Matter phenomenon to thank for this. Now, it is the responsibility of the LGBTQ movement, and most particularly it is the duty of white queer people who for too long have been presented as the most visible face of the movement, to step up and do the right thing. It is our job to stand with fast food workers, mostly people of color, many of them queer, as they fight for a $15 minimum wage. It is our job to stand shoulder to shoulder with Black Lives Matter against the scourge of racist killer cops, against mass incarceration, against the whole structure of institutionalized racism and the racist capitalist state. It is our job to stand shoulder to shoulder with the immigrant rights movement against ICE and mass deportation and mass killings and imprisonment of migrant youths. It is our job to link hands with our Palestinian sisters and brothers and say no to the Israeli settler state's pinkwashing, that is, Israel's PR campaign to portray itself as some sort of haven for gay people, white gay people that is, all the while maintaining and intensifying its brutal, racist, genocidal occupation of historic Palestine. All of this is our duty because it's the right thing to do, and because it will strengthen the overall class struggle, which is the way forward to combat and someday defeat all forms of oppression. Finally, and I left this for last so that it would have the most impact, so that I could leave you with these thoughts, I'm going to end as I started, by focusing on the most oppressed in our LGBTQ community, and that is trans people, and in particular, black and other trans people of color. It is true that the recent period has seen an unprecedented flowering of the trans liberation movement, a great new visibility, and a growing social acceptance of trans people. Some see Caitlyn Jenner's debut on the cover of Vanity Fair as a tipping point. Whether that will prove to be the case remains to be seen. What is undeniable is that more and more trans people, genderqueer people, people who identify and define themselves in various ways that don't fit the rigid gender norms of this society are coming forward courageously and defiantly and telling the world, this is who I am, you must accept me as I am. I have as much worth as anyone else. This is a magnificent thing, and we in Workers' World applaud it. It's been a long time coming. However, along with the advances have come terrible, painful, vicious attacks. Reactionary politicians call for imprisonment or even death to trans people. Religious fundamentalists decry the trans movement. Government blocks equal rights laws. And worst of all, and all over the country, trans people face bloody, violent attacks. Anti-trans murders, ignored or encouraged by, and sometimes done by, the cops, are epidemic. The most oppressed have the worst of it. The toll of our people of color, trans sisters and brothers, mostly black, mostly sisters, who have been murdered recently is terrible to recite. Michelle Vash Payne, killed in Los Angeles in February. Ty Underwood, killed in Texas in January. London Chanel, killed last month in Philadelphia. Islan Nettles, Maya Hall, Poppy Edwards, Lamia Beard, Taha Gabriel de Jesus, Penny Proud. According to the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, 72% of hate crimes against LGBTQ people are against trans people. And of these, 90% are against trans people of color. If this is not a call to action, I don't know what is. These are our sisters, and they are being killed. The dead cry out for vengeance, and the living must be defended. Black trans lives matter. This is our promise. This is our pledge. Black lives matter. And we in the queer community must put our bodies on the line for this great cause. Onward to liberation for all. Fight back, fight back, fight back in the spirit of Stonewall.